Welcome to the John Jones gravesite, and I hope you all continue to visit John Jones's home, which you'll probably march past when you go to the Woodlawn Cemetery. We can't claim the fact that the cemetery was started by John Jones, but it's coincidental. The government bought part of that land from Woodlawn Cemetery, and they had a contract with John Jones to bury the prisoners that died at the prison camp, and he kept very careful records. Now, I was told to be limited, and they were going to do this if I get talking too much. But when John Jones escaped and got up to this area, the man could not write or read very well, as we can find out. So he had some of the abolitionists in the community encourage him to go to school. So he went into school one day. Now here you're talking about an adult, you're not talking about a child. And they wouldn't let him in. The teacher wouldn't let him in. So he went back, and the judge ordered the teacher to take him in. So he comes the next day, the judge, with judge's orders, and they said, "I'm sorry, we don't have enough seats for you. You cannot come." Third day he comes back, guess what? He's carrying his chair. So they could not say you could not sit down. So that's where he learned to read and write. And why I'm saying this is that he was kept from reading and writing, and the people that he so carefully and reverently buried, he had recorded their name. You'll see the tombstones, the unit they were from, the state they were from. These are all from his records. Now, he originally put down wooden tombstones. Of course, you know and I know that didn't last very long, a couple of maybe 20 years or so. So the stones that are in there are stones that were put in by the government later. And he buried those, with the exception of 4 people, I believe. There's a debate of that, whether he had all their names. Some of the prisoners, from the time they were captured until the time they died, refused to tell a Union officer or a recorder their names, or where they were from, or what unit they served with. There were 4 or 5. Another interesting part of this is that John Jones, in burying the deceased of one of them, and he looked down and he recognized the name. And after a period of time, he did more research, I believe, and he realized it was the youngest son of the overseer from the plantation that he escaped from. And he sent a letter back to the father and told him of where his son was buried. Well, after the war was over, they sent his remains back to the I don't know if they were still living on the plantation or not, but back to the area, and the father buried him. So the fact that he was kept from education when he was a slave, and how he used his education to do what he did for the people that held him in bondage, I think says a great deal about the man's character and about the man's fortitude. Now, I was telling Mr. Jones a story that also is connected with John Jones, and I think it's an interesting, another interesting story. We had a gentleman that was working in Baltimore, and he was a free man, and he was a barber. And while he was working in Baltimore, he met a young black lady, and obviously they fell in love, but they couldn't get married because she was a slave. So they planned her escape. Well, the barber's mother was also a free woman from New York State. New York's freed their slaves in 1824. She came down and they made up a plan. The first thing they did was find one of those huge sea trunks. And then they went down to the packet that ran from Baltimore around the peninsula and up to Philadelphia. They made plans. They put his wife-to-be in the trunk, put it on one of the packets. Well, being a black woman, the captain says you cannot go inside. You have to stay out here. Well, that was really a godsend, because she could sit by the trunk and keep her eyes on the trunk so nothing would happen to her. Once they arrived in Philadelphia, William Sill, who was a conductor of the Underground Railroad in Philadelphia, met the packet. They brought her to his house, took her out, and then she found her way, but with John Jones's help, up to Elmira and married. Their age varies. Some say she's 18, some say she's 21. It really doesn't make any difference. And they lived in Elmira for a short period of time, and she became ill, she died, and she was buried here in the cemetery. And they have her grave marked. So I think that's another thing that you have to think about with John Jones. A lot of people don't realize that every time he did something to help an escaped slave, he could have been arrested and sent back to the South. And he was really working in dangerous areas. And you have to admire him, and his wife as well. They had as high sometimes as 20 people hiding in their house during the day. And at night, the train used to come from Williamsport north up into the Canandaigua area, and from there the train would split. And some would go up into Sodus, and some would go over into Buffalo. Well, most of his slaves went to Buffalo. They escaped and got into St. Catharines in Ontario, Canada. So there is a number of black residents in St. Catharines that probably could trace their lineage back through John Jones's escape route. John was very active after the war. Of course, or when the war started, the Underground Railroad ceased to exist. And then after the war, after he had served doing his thing with the government and so forth, he went back to his normal life. And when you go down to see the house is sitting on a corner. It's not where it originally was built, but it's sitting on a corner of his farm. That was all his farm down through there. I think it started at Grand Street and went up to Woodlawn Avenue. And he retired. It was a retired farmer, gentleman farmer. He was a quite prosperous man. And he was very active in the Baptist church downtown. I don't know if you've been down there or not, but that beautiful red Baptist church. And they bought his old house to help build that church. His house was not too far away from the parking lot, and he was able to, at night, get the people out of his house. The train tracks were on the ground level at that time, and he got them into the trains with the help of a couple of railroad people and sent them on their way. Now, just a brief thing about John Jones. He died right at the 1900s. But here is the stone that a group of Southside students, along with Lucy Brown, put down here to mark John Jones's house, or his grave. And Lucy was also a very important mover in getting the house saved. And they were going to destroy it, and they saved it. They managed to move it. The city sold a parcel of the land to the house, so we could put the house there, and it is his original. And then this is the rest of his family. His wife and his children are buried through here, and after John Jones died, his wife went to live in Owego, and she passed away in Owego. They brought her back here. His sons, the living sons, dispersed. They went to Michigan. One went into the military, and so the family line stopped here. If you'll hear someone say, "Well, I'm related to John Jones," well, you might be, but it's not this John Jones. It's probably John Jones across the street or something. But we did find a nephew. We're trying to get his lineage straightened out. We think that he was a nephew to the mother, to John Jones's wife.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to introduce Mr. Sam Green. He's joined us today from Buffalo area, Rochester area, and he's going to lay the wreath for John.
Picture. Keep going.